What up, cucks? It's your boy, the Hater, and it's time for another episode of Hater Outdoors, motherfuckers. Hater Outdoors. Hater Outdoors at night. You know what I'm saying? So we're going to do a Raw review, and I will say a few things about this episode of Raw. I will admit, there were many things in this episode that were quite enjoyable, right? There were many things that were quite enjoyable. However, the persistent criticism that I've had for Raw for the last 5 months or so remains. Once again, nothing fundamentally happened. So, before we get to that conclusion, let's go through everything in order and go from there, right? Because, you never know, right? Maybe I'm wrong when I think these things through, but, at least I have to explain myself. So, the show starts out with a pretty good segment, right? Basically, Rhea Ripley comes out, and even though she returned like 3 or 4 weeks ago, she starts talking now. This was a colossal waste of time for the first few minutes because Rhea Ripley is not an electrifying promo, right? Recently, I've been talking a lot about that, right? We need more electrifying wrestlers, meaning a wrestler that comes out and the fans hang on every word. You know what I mean? I would say that when Carlito debuted back in the day, that's when the mediocrity started happening. Carlito was, pretty decent on the microphone. He got a lot of mic time, and he kind of set the standard for what it means to be good on the mic again, right? Like, of course, we had Cena, who was pretty good on the mic, but even Cena, right? Like, if we're being honest, there's a difference between Cena and The Rock and Stone Cold. And granted, those are really, really high levels, right? Like, Triple H, I'd put him in the category of Cena, right? Where he can cut a pretty interesting promo, he can be compelling, but he's not electrifying to that point. However, at least Triple H can and did get the crowd interested. Rhea Ripley also did that, but that's only because this is the first time she spoke in like 8 months or whatever, since WrestleMania at least, I should say, not 8 months, right? But she basically came and she said what everyone knew she was gonna say. She said, oh, Rhea Ripley is back, Dominic sucks, Liv Morgan sucks. She said Dominic has a small penis, basically, which I think is silly because, it's one of those situations, right, where it's like, Rhea Ripley can say this about Dominic, but if Dominic comes out and says, look, I left you because Liv is much harder than you, and you look kind of like a man, you know what I mean? And you could drop a few pounds. Let's say he said that, right? You know what I mean? Like, that wouldn't fly over the same way, but that's fine. I get how things are, and I'm not complaining about it. I'm just saying that it's like such a silly and predictable thing. She basically cut the promo that Chyna cut when she betrayed Jericho, for Latino heat, you know what I'm saying? And if we're talking about penis sizes, let's be honest, Dominic Mysterio probably has a big Mysterio mule over there, you know what I'm saying? So anyways, but jokes aside, basically she cuts this promo. Dominic and Liv are out in the crowd, right? They cut like a counter promo. Basically, Dominic says that exactly what I've been saying for weeks. The reason why he's going to leave Rhea for Liv. Now, I'm not saying that I'm some sort of clairvoyant, because this wasn't really hard to see. But basically, he just says what I've been saying, which is that Rhea Ripley made him feel like a beta male, right? Basically, a grown man calling a woman mommy and basically being bossed around by her is ridiculous. Then Dominic makes it hilarious when he says, Liv gives me tendies whenever I want, and she lets me play video games, which he pretty much solidified himself as like this boyish neckbeard character, which he already was, right? They really need to like hone in on the Dominic Mysterio character, because sometimes he does that, then we're also supposed to believe he's simultaneously a ladies' man, and while the two are possible, it's possible to be a ladies' man and like video games, no one's saying it's not, right? It's just like, let's settle in on a character for big Dom, right? So anyways, that happens. Rhea Ripley basically says, well, it's good that you guys came out to cut a promo because now I know where you are. Damian Priest appears like the Undertaker behind Dominic and behind Liv, right? And the fans go nuts. He beats up Dominic. Liv jumps on his back. They kind of go to the concessions area, right? Somehow, Rhea Ripley sprints up, I guess, because she's there within seconds. You know what I mean? It was actually really impressive. So she goes out there and there's just like a brawl. The brawl leads back to the ring with the men. And basically, as the brawl continues, Damian gets attacked by Carlito, who he knocks out of the ring, right? Now, with all that being said, this transitions quickly and smoothly into the first match of the night. Carlito versus Damian Priest. The match was pretty decent. Carlito got a lot of offense, and in my opinion, he shouldn't, because he's now the J.D. McDonough of the group, right? It's like, remember when Matt Hardy got Shannon Moore as his first MFer, Mattitude follower, and then eventually they added Crash Holly as Shannon Moore's moron, right? So like the hierarchy was Matt Hardy, then Shannon Moore, then Crash Holly, right? Now it's the same thing, right? JD was at the bottom of the totem pole, then Carlito came along. So JD stands above Carlito, then above him is Dominic, and above him is Finn Balor, right? Dominic and Liv, I consider them one. Above them is Finn Balor, and above Finn Balor on the totem pole is like some eagle or some shit, you know what I'm saying? But with all that being said, the match was pretty decent, but it was clear, obviously, what was going to happen. Damian Priest hits the lights out, you know, the little lifting reverse STO, which actually was Carlito's finishing move for like 3 weeks back in the day. Then eventually he goes for the Razor's Edge. Carlito gets out of it, and then eventually hits the chokeslam. What's interesting about this, and I thought about it, was when they had the Puerto Rico show, Carlito came in, right, and he was the one that like beat the hell out of Priest when Priest was the heel, but things have changed since then. Damian Priest, by the way, looks great. He's just like more lean, and he's already a big muscular guy, so it looks great. He didn't have eyeshadow on and none of that, so it looks like he's abandoning that lame-ass part of his gimmick, so I really enjoyed that. Then, eventually, after he pins Carlito with the South of Heaven, literally the same thing that happened last week happens again. Judgment Day attacks him, and Rhea Ripley comes back with music this time. Like, it's like, why didn't she just hang around? You know what I mean? Why, she was chasing Liv Morgan this whole time, and then she went to Gorilla, and then told him, hit my music? That made no sense whatsoever. I know they wanted to get a pop, but it was a cheap pop, right? She comes in, same thing happens. This time, Carlito's gonna get wrecked. Finn Balor comes in looking like a cholo. He's wearing this like a long button-up shirt that he buttoned up all the way, just like a cholo. It was green, right? He comes in there, JD pushes Finn Balor out of the way, and JD gets kicked in the head instead. And then JD gets another South of Heaven. So the storyline, I suppose, is when will Damian Priest get his hands on Finn Balor? Now, okay, Finn Balor is the one who directly cost him the title shot, but it's not really common sense. It's not really sensical generally, right? That Finn Balor is the primary and only target essentially for Damian Priest, right? Just like he went after Dominic, he should have beef with everyone involved, right? As a matter of fact, his issue is not just with Finn Balor, right? It's with the fact that the Judgment Day colluded to allow Finn Balor to do this. The fact that Finn Balor directly caused them the match doesn't really, like, you know, have the weight, I think, storytelling-wise, narrative-wise, that the WWE writers think it does. Nevertheless, this is what happened, and this is all going to culminate, for the time being, in a mixed tag team match at Bash in Berlin. Rhea and Damian versus Dominic and Liv Morgan, right? That should be interesting, but basically, I can already tell you what's going to happen. Finn Balor's going to come, and he's going to cost Rhea Ripley and Damian Priest the match, probably, right? That's probably what's going to happen, and this is just going to serve as fodder for the inevitable Damian Priest-Finn Balor match, which a few years ago was an undercard match. Now it's like a mid-card match, so good for them, right? After this, I mean, like I said, the match was okay. But then we have a backstage segment. The story of the backstage segment is that Odyssey Jones is essentially part of the New Day now, and Xavier Woods isn't very happy about it, right? But he's like, oh yeah, great, right? So it's going to be Odyssey Jones versus a jobber named Vincent Winey, right? Now, this is exactly all you need to know about this, right? You can go back a few videos in my channel, and you're going to see exactly what I said being validated, right? There are no more mid-carders, right? And even the jobbers, even the undercard act, right? Even the equivalents of like Carmelo Hayes and Andrade, and Raw has a bunch of those, right? Even those guys aren't good enough to lose to Odyssey Jones, who's brand new. Odyssey Jones destroys this Vincent Whitney guy with a boss man slam, which he calls the Journey's End, and pins him. Karrion Kross comes out and reminds me that the Final Testament is essentially the same thing as early Judgment Day. You know what I'm saying? It's the same fucking thing. They have the same, like, oh, we're devils. You know what I mean? Oh, the devil's work is never done. Paul Ellering, who's a 70-year-old man, he looks great, but he comes out with a black X painted on his forehead, and it's like, you're a 70-year-old man. What are you doing? But anyways, Akam and Razor are there just there collecting a paycheck, doing nothing. Scarlett, same thing. Karrion Kross, same thing too, honestly. He cuts a promo and basically he says, look, Xavier, it looks like Odyssey Jones is replacing Big E, but in reality, he's replacing you, right? And basically like Kofi and Xavier say, no, that's not what's happening, blah, blah, blah. They try to do a tag match. Kofi makes it into a 6-man match, and inevitably Xavier Woods is going to cost Kofi the match at some point, and maybe Kofi's going to transition into more of a, I don't want to say a managerial role, because I think Kofi's still got a few good years in him, but like he's going to be like with Odyssey Jones, and this would be the end of New Day, right? I believe, I could be wrong, but I believe that Xavier Woods is a little bit younger than Kofi, so maybe he can get a push out of this, but he just wouldn't fit at all in the Final Testament, right? Because the Final Testament is, number one, the whole premise is that these are all badasses. Like, you know, that's the first premise. Xavier Woods is not a badass. One. Two, Xavier Woods, his whole career is power of positivity. So it just doesn't make sense unless they completely revamp his character, and they would need to even change his name or something, right? A funny little botch that happened was when Karrion Kross is getting booed. And when I say booed, I mean like they're piping in booing, because there's a lot of piped in sounds this episode, because there's no way the fans are reacting to the things that they told us they're reacting to, right? And then he says, Austin, show me some respect. Michael Cole automatically thinks he's talking about Xavier Woods, whose real name is Austin, and who's, I think his real name's Austin, but he also goes by Austin Creed, right? I thought that for a second too, then I'm like, oh, they must be in Austin, you know? I didn't even know where they were, and I'm like, oh, they must be in Austin, Texas. And then Michael Cole says, I don't think Xavier's gonna listen. So pretty much, Michael Cole, the idiot, he does this all the time, by the way. Michael Cole basically establishes that Xavier Woods is just a fictional character breaking kayfabe. To make matters worse, Pat McAfee says, Texas, Cole, right? He corrects Michael Cole, proving that Michael Cole is a dummy. But anyways, that's what happens, right? Then we have, at some point, we had a Bo Dallas video. It was a complete and utter waste of time. The Wyatt Six were not involved in today's Raw, which I would say is for the better because they suck ass, but it does once again prove that they are not this serious force in the least, right? Like, you have to think about it for a second. I'll do another video on this soon, but you have to think about the impact that, the Wyatt Six was supposed to have and the impact that they're having, right? They were supposed to be, like months ago we started seeing the vignettes, they were supposed to be this big deal, right? And now they're relegated to an act that wrestles against Chad Gable, and Chad Gable isn't even scared of them. You know what I mean? So who gives a rat's ass? Nobody cares about this at all. Next, we had an excellent match. Alpha Academy versus American Made. I like this match very, very much. I just thought that everyone involved just meshed really well. And primarily, it's because I think all 4 people involved are very, very good at what they do. First of all, Otis has incredible comedic timing. There's something just inherently funny about this guy, right? Tozawa, same thing, and Tozawa is also great. He's just great at his job. He does cool moves. He's always in good shape, right? He's a charismatic guy for what he is. He's a good-looking guy. Like, he's too small. He's never going to be a star, but he has some potential. You know what I mean? Akira Tozawa, and that's why I bring him up all the time. Akira Tozawa deserves, I mean, if the Cruiserweight division was still around, he should be the Cruiserweight champion. That's as far as I can go with that. Meanwhile, on the other side of the coin, we have Brutus and Julius Creed. These guys are just amazing. Like, it's them and Bronson Reed are the only wrestlers in WWE right now that are like maybe Carmelo Hayes to a much lesser extent, but these guys are just like athletic specimen. Like, they are just built different. You know what I mean? Like, the amount of times that Julius Creed just caught Tozawa in these weird, compromising situations was insane, right? That guy is just built different. Brutus is not much worse either. He's not as athletic in terms of, like, I don't think he can jump as high, but he's, like, more legit as a wrestler. These guys are just amazing. Like, they don't get tired. They're just throwing people around. They deserve a lot more than what they're getting. Hopefully this comes out to something good, but these guys are just very, very talented guys. Like, it just shows how athletically gifted they are, just the things that they do. They're like lifting people like it's nothing. They're doing crazy ass spots. They did like a Tower of Doom. Tozawa was kicking ass. Otis was kicking ass. And I should have mentioned that before the match, there was a weird moment between Ivy Nile and Maxine Dupree, who apparently have been best friends for about 25 minutes. Because I never heard of them being friends at all, but apparently they're best friends. Ivy Nile is part of the Diamond Mine. You know what I mean? So all of a sudden, Michael Cole and Pat McAfee are surprised when Ivy Nile attacks Maxine Dupree, even though, Ivy Nile tells Maxine Dupree, like, I'm going to attack you, basically. She's like, why don't you join us? She's like, I'm not leaving my family. She's like, okay, I see how it is, basically. And then she goes and attacks Maxine Dupree. This causes a distraction, and the only criticism I have of this match is that the match ends with like a double pin. It was a Texas Tornado match, so all 4 men can be in the ring. It ends with like basically a roll-up, like a stacked roll-up on Tozawa, right? It's like You know, it should have just ended with like a finishing move, you know, like an avalanche Brutus ball or anything like that. But whatever, you know, beggars can't be choosers. I thought the match was excellent for what it was, right? Then we have a pretty interesting promo by Damage Control. It was half English, half Japanese. It should have been all in Japanese. Kairi Sane, she was very compelling in her promo. I couldn't believe it, right? Because I still don't believe that this girl understands what wrestling is. But nevertheless, her promo was pretty good, right? It had subtitles. She delivered it with like a certain level of charisma that I didn't know she possessed, right? But the promo itself wasn't anything special because it was followed by the exact same promo from Sonya Deville's people, which had a goofy name. I forget what they're called now, but it was like the Plush Factor, like contingency or something like that. It was something stupid. The Pure Fusion Collective. I wrote it down. The Pure Fusion, the Plush Factor Contingency. Motherfucks. We should just call them the Plush Factor Contingency, but they're called the Pure Fusion Collective. I don't fucking know what the hell that means, but it just seems very stupid, you know. So whatever, it is what it is. So. That's what happened. There was a match between Kairi and Io Sky later on at some point. I think it was next, actually, I don't remember. Versus, I believe it was Sonya Deville. No, Zoe Stark and Shayna Baszler, right? The match was ruined in a stupid way by Isla Dawn and Alba Fire, right? Basically what happened was Zoe Stark or Shayna Baszler, one of them, kicked Alba Fire, and then Isla Dawn goes and attacks Damage Control when they're about to win. Right? It was really, really weird because why are you attacking the people that didn't attack you? Attack people that attacked you. So they beat the hell out of everybody, but they primarily beat the hell out of Damage Control. So that was really, really weird, but whatever, right? Then we have a horrible, horrible segment. It was Randy Orton and Gunther. Once again, right, as we're seeing very clearly here, this week's episode of Raw was the exact same thing as last week's episode of Raw. We had the same segment as last week between Randy Orton and Gunther. The segment basically is, I'm going to beat you, you're going to beat me, whatever, right? But it got really dumb when Gunther basically says with a straight face, I can't believe whoever wrote this, like Gunther should have been like, I'm not saying this is fucking stupid. But basically he says, Randy Orton, you didn't live up to your full potential. All Randy Orton had to do to counter this is say, I didn't live up to my full potential. You made it to the WWE in your mid-30s, and you were fat until last week. That's all Randy Orton had to say. What are you talking about potential? You've been fat your whole career. And now that you made it to the big leagues somehow, you finally got it together and you're now, living out your potential. You were wrestling in front of 12 Austrians in Austria while Randy Orton was main eventing WrestleMania. You know what I mean? And that's why this promo, in my opinion, was extremely stupid. Because Gunther was talking to Randy Orton at minimum as if they're equals, and at maximum as if Gunther is superior. And I get that's kind of his gimmick, but you have to know your role. You have to know your place, right? Randy Orton, he's like, oh, you're a screw-up, Randy Orton. Randy Orton is a 14-time world champion. He's like number 4 or number 3. Like, it's like Flair, Cena are tied at 16. I think Triple H might have 15, and then after that, it's Orton. You know what I mean? He's the 4th best guy, 2-time Rumble winner, multiple-time WrestleMania main eventer. You know what I mean? I think he only main evented 1 real WrestleMania or 2 because he lost to Daniel Bryan. But he's like a legit WrestleMania guy. Like, he's been in many title matches at WrestleMania. He's main evented countless pay-per-views. And more importantly, there is a 0% chance that Gunther is ever going to outperform Randy Orton in terms of a career, right? Now, I understand. Gunther was saying that, like, Randy Orton is like a physically talented guy, and the implications are Gunther isn't, basically, right? Because that's why Randy Orton is being held to a higher standard, right? Because there's absolutely no chance in hell that Gunther, who just won his bullshit World Heavyweight title at like 35 or 36, whatever he is, that there's absolutely no way that this guy can go to Randy Orton and say, oh, I've achieved more than you in any capacity. It's like, dude, Randy Orton was champion when he was 25. You know what I'm saying? He was like the youngest WWE champion. Randy Orton was like a 10-time champion by the time Gunther, by the time he was 36. You know what I mean? If not more. So, like, it's just silly. You know what I mean? It's just foolish. But anyways, basically what happens is Drew McIntyre comes out, doesn't do anything, but he gets attacked by CM Punk. CM Punk is honing in on the bracelet, right? Gunther turns around, Orton turns him around again, hits the RKO, quote unquote, out of nowhere, right? It's a goddamn train passing by. So, that was okay, I guess. Like, there was an RKO that we got to see, but who cares, right? Meanwhile, afterwards, they do a little interview with CM Punk, right? And CM Punk says, I don't care about the bracelet. Really? I thought this whole feud was about a bracelet. As a matter of fact, during the beatdown, CM Punk steals Drew McIntyre's belt. And I couldn't help but think, okay, he's got your bracelet, you got his belt. Feud over, cuckolds. I will note something interesting happened. When CM Punk was walking backstage, before he had a horrible ass interview with some girl who reminds me of Kathy Kelly, but I don't think it is Kathy Kelly, right? Like, basically this girl's like, correct me if I'm wrong, but weren't you on my flight? And then CM Punk's like, yeah, I was sitting next to you. But is this girl retarded? Correct me if I'm wrong. She should have been like, bro, you sat next to me. She presented it as like, oh, he was somewhere in the same flight, and she wasn't sure that he was there, right? But CM Punk was like, yeah, we sat next to each other. Like, he just completely ruined this moment. Nevertheless, in the background, when CM Punk is walking, they show this like large guy just angry walking around and hitting something off a table. I don't know if this was someone that, like, you know, we were supposed to recognize, or if it's like a impending debut of a different wrestler. I hope it's the latter, because that could be an interesting way to introduce someone. Like, you just have this guy doing random shit in the background, right? And then one day he just debuts. You know what I mean? That'd be pretty cool, but I'm not holding my breath, right? Speaking of BS segments, we had an interview by the same woman with Pete Dunne. Pete Dunne is angry at Sheamus because Sheamus used him and named him Butch. Okay, that's a shit feud. Then she has an interview with Sheamus where Sheamus says, I don't understand, fella, right? Like, and Sheamus is 100% right, because he's like, I've been gone for 6 months, right? That's basically, what the fuck has this guy been doing for 6 months? Just waiting for me to make a name for himself? Sheamus completely buries the entire Pete Dunne storyline. Ludwig Kaiser comes and cuts a boring ass like interview promo type thing, conversation with Sheamus. He's like, you know, we're not done, right? I don't know why I gave him like an Irish accent. Basically, he's like, we're not done. Pete Dunne, speaking of Dunne, Pete Dunne comes up and attacks Sheamus with a shillelagh. The attack was pretty vicious, I'm not gonna lie. So I really enjoyed that. He hits him in the hand as well. So there you have it, you know what I mean? Then we have The Miz versus Bronson Reed. Earlier today, Cucks, I watched, what's it called? I watched the WWE like mini documentary. There was nothing mini about it, because it was like an hour and 20 minutes, I think. But basically, the documentary of The Miz, right? It's like WWE 24 or something, right? I watched it, I thoroughly enjoyed it. So, like, when The Miz came out, they were also hyping up the debut of The Challenge, season 40, this Wednesday, I believe. I can't wait. I love The Challenge. Everyone in The Challenge is better than everyone in WWE. Like, if you haven't watched The Challenge, do yourself a favor. This Wednesday, I don't know what channel, I don't know what time, but look it up. Challenge season 40, there's a guy in The Challenge called CT. CT would murder everyone in WWE, even now. But in his prime, forget about it. It's not even close. So anyways, they talk about how The Miz was on The Challenge and he was very successful at it, and that's true. So, you know, when I first heard about The Miz back in the day, I was like, oh, this is like a MTV dork, right? Because I thought that people like Bob Holly were cooler than The Miz, right? But then I realized later that like Bob Holly and Chris Benoit, they're not real athletes. Like, CT would butcher them both. Like 2-on-1, CT would eat these motherfuckers, right? Because The Challenge had actual athletes and actual tough guys, right? So anyways, The Miz comes from that world. So once I learned that more recently, I started watching The Challenge like a few years ago, like 2 years ago maybe, right? And I've watched like a lot of the seasons since, right? Like, once I learned like what The Challenge was about, I realized real quick that there was no doubt. Nobody should have ever doubted that The Miz is gonna make it in WWE. Like, are you kidding me? Are you fucking insane? Like, Sami Zayn made it, you know what I mean? The Miz would murder Sami Zayn, right? Like, he's not, Sami Zayn's not tougher than The Miz. Kofi Kingston's not tougher than The Miz, you know? So The Miz fucking kicks ass. He loses this match predictably, but he has a pretty good showing. And instead of being completely buried, R-Truth is the one that takes the 19,000 tsunamis, right? Now, that being said, I thought The Miz was gonna turn R-Truth at the end of this match. But because it's with Bronson Reed, I understand why they did this. This is another opportunity that I want to take to talk about the complete incompetence of the character of Adam Pearce. Adam Pearce is the worst authority figure, obviously in wrestling, but he is the worst authority figure in the history of fictional authority figures in the world, and likely the worst than all real authority figures. This guy, like, if this guy was a real person, he would have been fired years ago. Adam Pearce is basically this moron, right? He's presented as this complete idiot who has nothing under control. Absolutely nothing. Like, all he does, him, Davari, fucking Kenny Dykstra, you know, Jason Jordan, all these guys, all they do is they show up and they tell people to stop. That's all. Stop! Stop. Like, why don't you just say, he should say to Bronson Reed, if you do it, you're fired. or you're suspended at minimum, right? And then have Bronson Reed do it anyways and get suspended. That would make the storyline more compelling. But basically, the way it looks is that basically Adam Pearce has absolutely no control over anything, right? And in many ways, I find myself being on the side of Bronson Reed, right? Because Adam Pearce was like, Bronson Reed's like, hey man, can I get an opportunity? He's like, no, fuck you, right? Bronson Reed's like, hey man, can I get an opportunity? No, fuck you, right? So eventually Bronson Reed's like, can I get an opportunity? He's like, no, fuck you. And he's like, I see how it is. No, you don't give me anything, so I'm gonna just take it because I know you're a pussy who can't do anything. So that's exactly what he's been doing, right? So it's like, what do you want from Bronson Reed? Like, what does Adam Pearce want from Bronson Reed as a character? What does he want? Bronson Reed to just be a jobber for the rest of his life, right? Bronson Reed got that boost, that push boost, right? Because I think if it was 6 months ago, Bronson Reed is losing to The Miz. But now he won, and I enjoyed it. It was pretty decent, right? Then we had the main event, Sami Zayn versus Braun Breaker. The interesting thing here was that it was a 2 out of 3 falls, right? Now, I don't particularly care about that, but it did make the match more compelling, right? It made it less skippable. Like, I wasn't sure how it was going to play out. In my opinion, what should have happened is Bronson Reed just spears Sami Zayn within the first 3 minutes, pins him, and then Sami Zayn gets up, 10 seconds later gets speared again, and Bronson Reed pins him again, right? But because it's a 2 or 3 falls, I knew Sami Zayn was going to win one of the falls. I thought he would probably win the first one, and I was right, right? Basically, the story of the match, though, was Bronson Reed is superior in every... Braun Breaker is superior in every possible way, right? Sami Zayn wins the first fall because basically Bronson Reed, motherfuckers, Braun Breaker makes the critical mistake that everyone makes in a Sami Zayn match. He runs to the corner for no reason. He runs to the corner, Sami Zayn runs right behind him, no selling the little stinger splash that Braun Breaker did, and hits the haluva kick, which is one of the worst finishes of all time, right? And pins him 1, 2, 3. Fantastic. Next up, exactly what should happen happens. Spear again. Like basically there's like a series of like 5 moves that Braun Breaker does that are like either finishing quality moves or they were his finisher for real, right? So he does the Breakensteiner, right? The top rope Frankensteiner, but he does it much more athletically than Scott Steiner ever did, right? Then he does the gorilla press slam thing into the power slam, and then he does 2 spears and pins Sami Zayn. After taking these 4 moves, Sami Zayn just basically gets up and starts fighting back, right? Like, as if nothing happened. You know what I mean? Like, this is the problem with Sami Zayn matches. It's like, Sami Zayn can just take everyone's finishers and then just get up, right? But the other guy takes one haluva kick and then they're done, right? Sami Zayn then hits like a haluva kick but not in the corner. And Michael Cole says, almost like a haluva kick. Dumbass. The haluva kick doesn't become magically more powerful if you do it in the corner, right? So he does that move. And then Braun Breaker kicks out, which was silly, but obviously the right call. Braun Breaker eventually gets up. Sami Zayn climbs the turnbuckle, jumps down, and Braun Breaker predictably spears him in the air. As soon as Sami Zayn climbed the turnbuckle, I'm like, all right, this is it. Spear in midair. Exactly what happened. Show ends almost immediately afterwards. So the show, in my opinion, gets a 4 out of 10 because there were some good matches, right? I would even say that the Sami Zayn Braun Breaker match was good. Not because of Sami Zayn, obviously, because Sami Zayn doesn't do anything. He has like 4 moves. But Braun Breaker, in my opinion, carried this match from beginning to the end, right? The amount of things that Braun Breaker is comfortable doing is scary. He can do a top rope Hurricane Rana. He dove from the apron onto the table, hurting himself way more than Sami Zayn. And then he got up, he sold the pain that he was probably in, right? He's just great. You know what I mean? And considering that he hasn't been wrestling for that long of a time, this guy can go, right? He can go. He can put on a great match. Like, I don't think it's controversial to say that in the ring, Braun Breaker is better than like Roman Reigns, right? I think most people would agree with that, obviously, right? Now, the ceiling of Braun Breaker is something to, obviously discuss about, to discuss, not discuss about. But, like he can be like a Roman Reigns in terms of like his presentation, but he'll never have that. He's got some presence for sure. You know what I mean? He definitely has that, but he also just like is kind of like not a goofball, but he's a Steiner. You know what I mean? He's gonna have that Steiner presence, which is considerable, but it doesn't rise to the level of the Tribal Chief or like Batista or Goldberg, right? He's a step below these guys, and that's where he's gonna be relegated to probably, right? But in terms of like the believability of him like spearing the shit out of people, it's more believable than Roman Reigns. And as a result, I have faith that Braun Breaker will be used semi-correctly, right? He's not the next Cena, he he can be the next like Orton, maybe, right? But there's several attributes that Orton has that he lacks, namely height and good looks. Not to say that Bronson Reed's a handsome guy, no doubt about it, but he doesn't have the movie star good looks of like a Randy Orton or a Roman Reigns, you know what I mean? And that's going to get in his way if we're being honest. They need to like, I'll tell you, when they introduce the next big thing, like the real next big star, I'll tell you who it's going to be based on the fact that this person's going to be very good looking, right? That's just always how it is. So anyways, the show gets a 4 because of this match, and in my opinion, the match of the night, Alpha Academy versus American Made. I thought the match was excellent. And, you know, the opening segment was okay, right? It was like, I'd give the opening segment like a 6 out of 10 because it went on too long. If you count the Carlito match, that was like 35 minutes. You know what I mean? So the whole thing went like 35 minutes. And in my opinion, once again, it should have closed the show, right? I get it. Braun Breaker is better, but, you know, how do you fit Braun Breaker in the same show with a group like the Wyatt Six? You know what I mean? Like, I guess the answer is you just don't because the Wyatt Six aren't on TV. But you get what I'm saying, motherfucks. 4 out of 10. Somewhere between 3 and 5 out of 10. So let's just split the difference and say 4 out of 10 for this Raw. Not bad, not good. It does not make me want to watch next week, right? The only reason I might watch next week is because some of the things that didn't happen this week, I expect to happen next week. Maybe the Wyatt Six will have another match, but I don't care about that at all. You know, Chad Gable maybe will be back. But quite frankly, I don't care about that either, right? That Raw is being ran basically by the Tozawas of the world, by the Creeds of the world, by Otis, by Damian Priest, just like SmackDown is being carried by Pretty Deadly, Carmelo Hayes, and fucking Andrade. And what do all these people have in common? None of them are compelling enough to make me want to tune in. We need main eventers, and we need them ASAP, and we need them to wrestle, right? At this juncture, it's like, okay, Cody Rhodes is in wrestling, and, you know, it almost makes me want to miss Seth Rollins as a presence, because Seth Rollins isn't there either, but, you know, when he was champion, he was wrestling, right? At the very least, he wasn't wrestling a crazy amount, but he was wrestling way more than Cody Rhodes, and, you know, than Cody Rhodes is now, and obviously he's wrestling way more than Gunther is wrestling now, right? I get it. Gunther just won the title, but 2 weeks off is ridiculous. Like, Gunther already has like a built-in tag team partner in Kaiser. Just do Gunther and Kaiser versus fucking, I don't know, like Drew McIntyre and Sheamus, right? Make them friends again. And then after that, you know, you can end the match with CM Punk interfering. I don't care, right? But the point is, at least give me the illusion that Gunther is wrestling. I'd like to see the world champions wrestle more frequently than once a month. And with that being said, Cucks, take care of yourselves and go watch the challenge. You heard?